what does it actually mean to be a Proverbs 31 woman? And from the perspective of this podcast, what does that mean as a business owner? This is something I've wondered for a while. So in this first episode of the new and hopefully improved Faith and Focus podcast, that's what I want to talk about. We're going to look at some of the lesser talked about aspects of this passage and how I feel it relates to being a business owner. But before we dive into this, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you never miss a tutorial or upload. Okay, so before we dive into this and honestly into this new era of the podcast altogether, I want to make a couple of things very, very clear. Number one, I am not a pastor. I am not a Bible expert in any way other than I've been a Christian my entire life and I've read the Bible multiple times. I have been a business owner for over 20 years. I've had two main businesses that I have run and in one case decided to move away from and let go of. And I've learned a lot in the past couple of years about what it actually means to let God, let Jesus be a major part of how you run your business. And honestly, I feel like it's a really big part of why I've started to see more and more success over the last year, especially. So this podcast is intended to be what God has been showing me about how to be a Christian business owner, how to really include him in the back end and the front end in some cases, like right now, of my business. And I thought I'd just bring you along for the ride and see what insights God brings to all of us as a community. But in addition to that, I'm going to take some of the things that I've learned over the past couple of years, but especially in the last year or so, and help you take some actionable steps and apply the passages that we talk about in your business. So the format of this new podcast is going to be kind of like this. The first week of each month, there's going to be a longer episode like this one that you're watching right now, where we actually talk about a Bible verse or a couple of verses or even a full passage like we're going to do this month. And we're going to talk about some of the ways that it might relate to your business and just you as a business owner. But then the remaining weeks of the month are going to be really quick little, I think I'm going to call them quick focuses. You let me know. I tried to do something with alliteration, but fast focus just I didn't like it. If you guys have a suggestion for what we might call those little quick tips, but they're not even really tips. And that's, I think, why quick tip doesn't feel right to me. I think that's what I originally said I was going to call them. But as I've been planning this month, I'm realizing they're not so much tips as they are things to focus on specifically for that week. So let me know if you have suggestions for what we might call those little quickie episodes, those quick focuses in the future, or maybe you just like quick focus and we'll just go with that. But anyways, so those are going to be those actionable things. They'll be super quick little episodes, maybe like 5 minutes or less, and they will just help you to find a way to focus for the next week. These episodes do release on Fridays, which means that it'll give you all weekend to plan and figure out how you're going to implement that focus in the coming week. So that is the plan here. We're starting with what I feel like is kind of an obvious choice, Proverbs 31. Especially as women. I mean, we hear about Proverbs 31 all the time about how to be the Proverbs 31 woman, how to be the Proverbs 31 wife, Proverbs 31 mother, I guess. I don't know. That's not really my area of expertise at all. But just like we relate the practical aspects of passages and things that we read in the Bible to the roles that we play in life, right? Mother, wife, daughter, all of those things. I mean, why is business owner so often left out of that? So that's kind of what I want to do here on the podcast. We're starting with a passage here that I think is a really, really solid biblical foundation for starting off a new year as a business owner. Whether your business is brand new and so you're just getting started, and if so, I am so a little bit jealous of you that you are thinking of this God perspective of it so early on, because it took me forever to get there. But if not, if you're like me and this is something that's coming up a little bit later in your journey as a business owner, that's okay. It is never too late to start adding more God into your business. Like I said, I've been a business owner for over 20 years, and it's only in the last few years that I've really been this intentional about bringing God into my business in the back end, and then it kind of just spilled out into the front end, as you guys have seen over the past year or so. Okay, so Proverbs 31. So first off, I always thought that this is just kind of like an aside, but it's kind of important, I think, because it gives us some context for where Proverbs 31 came from, where these qualities come from. So I've always heard it just Proverbs 31. So I assumed it was the entire chapter. Now, here's the thing. Yes, I have read it before, but never so much with the same intention as when I decided to use this for the first episode of the podcast. So it never really clicked with me that it wasn't actually the entire chapter and that it's only a portion of it. And so just to give a little context, again, I am not a biblical scholar. I am not a pastor. But the first part of Proverbs 31 is us learning about King Lemuel. I don't know how you say it, but one or the other. He's the one who actually wrote this poem. And yes, that is going to be important in a minute. This poem about the perfect woman, or his idea of the ideal woman. And that is what this Proverbs 31 is. Now, does that mean it's not God inspired? Of course not. It's not just what this king thinks. It's not even based on what his mom thinks, which is actually a big part of the first part of this chapter. But just to understand that not only was this written as a poem, this was a love poem from this king. We're just going to go with Lemuel. I have no idea what's correct. But this is kind of like, think of it being like his Valentine's Day poem to his love. I don't even think we're told who she is. So while these are qualities that we should absolutely strive for, we need to remember the context that this is not a laundry list of to-dos. This is not the things that God is telling us, you need to be this, and that's what makes you a godly woman. Yes, all of the qualities that we're going to talk about here are wonderful and they are godly qualities, but this is like an ideal romanticized vision of a woman. Okay, so this is not something that we are or should be. Then again, these are all my opinions, but I don't feel like this is meant to be a standard that we need to hold ourselves to in its entirety. I think that when we are struggling with certain areas, when we are looking for guidance in how to be in certain ways, whether it's how to be a wife, how to be a better, more integrous woman, or in the case that we're going to talk about, how to be a more integrous, godly businesswoman, this is a great place to come to give us that guidance and help us know what are the targets I should be aiming at here as far as the qualities and the values that I hold. So speaking of qualities, I feel like the ones that we hear about the most, or at least the ones I hear about the most when it comes to Proverbs 31, is that the Proverbs 31 woman is a woman of character. She's a woman of integrity, and she's a woman of honor. These are all qualities that are so important for us as humans, as women, and yeah, as business owners. But because they get talked about all the time, I'm kind of not, they're going to interject themselves into what we're talking about here, but I'm not going to focus on that grouping altogether because I feel like we hear it a lot, right? So we're going to go a little bit deeper and we're going to talk about the things that really jumped out at me when I looked at this passage from the lens of a business owner. So I'm going to be jumping around a little bit as I read in this passage. Yes, we are going to read it from an actual Bible. So if you want to pause for a second and go get yours so you can see it in your translation, your version, that's fantastic. I'm going to be reading from the NLT. It's the one that I resonate with the most recently. So what I've done here is I've kind of tried to organize these qualities a little bit because listen, when I went to sit down and just read directly through the passage, which by the way is Proverbs 31 verses 10 to 31. When I went and read through and just started jotting down all of the qualities, and yes, I did this in a Trello card. If we've met before, that should not be a surprise to you. I did this in a checklist, and the checklist was so long. There were so many different qualities that came up in these verses. And I started thinking, I'm like, okay, I could do just like a marathon, like the longest episode possible, where we talk about all of these things. Or I could actually group them into kind of like logical like qualities, and we'll just talk through them that way. And so that's the way I'm going to approach it here. So I'm going to then need to jump around a little bit when I read in the passage. So just bear with me there. But the first grouping of qualities and values that we find here in the Proverbs 31 woman is that she is diligent, she is disciplined, and she is hardworking. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear qualities like that, I immediately think of what it takes to run my business. I have to be diligent. I have to be disciplined. That is a really, really big one. And I have to be hardworking, right? Those are the only ways that a business actually succeeds in the long term. We're not talking about fly-by-night businesses. We're not talking about going viral for a second. We're talking about slow build, long lasting, successful businesses. So let's start with the first verse that totally goes along with this grouping. So it's verse 15. She gets up before dawn to prepare breakfast for her household and plan the day's work for her servant girls. Okay, let's back up for a second because I am not saying you have to get up before dawn. I do right now, but to be fair, I live in Idaho and it's winter. And so before dawn is like before 8 a.m. Okay. So there's nothing wrong with getting up super early because there was a season in my life where I definitely did that. When I was working out of my house, I still have a day job now, but I get to work from home. I'm super blessed in that. But back in the day, I didn't have that blessing. I had to drive all the way to downtown LA. This is when I lived, obviously, in California. And because of the traffic patterns there, and look, if you've lived in a busy metro area, especially LA, you know what I'm talking about. I luckily did have the blessing of being able to kind of shift and choose my work schedule. And so I decided to start work at 7 a.m. in the office in downtown LA. And I did that because then I wasn't driving home at 5 p.m., right? Y'all feel me. If you've been in this kind of situation, you know what I'm saying. It's worth it to get up early. But what that means is that it didn't leave me really any space for a devotional in the morning. It didn't leave me any space for like that slow wake up, which I don't know if you're like me, but I need that slow transition from dead asleep to waking up. And yes, that does start with multiple alarms on my phone. But I needed that time. Plus, I wanted to have a little bit of extra time to do a little business stuff before I had to leave. So think about that. I had to be in the office at 7. Even with that traffic, that meant I had to leave by like 6:15. So to have any of that time for breakfast, for taking a shower and getting ready for work, and also having time for all of those things, it meant that I was getting up at easily 4:45 every morning. Right now, I can't even imagine that because I have gotten myself into such a habit of kind of sleeping in a little bit more. And so I struggle to remember how I did that. I know practically how I did that, but like emotionally and mentally and physically, how I managed to do that. But it was so worthwhile for me at the time, and it was what I needed. Based on what your life looks like right now, you may be in a season where you need to do that too. And that's where that discipline comes in. That's where that diligence, and honestly, it's hard work as well to do something like that, especially if you don't see yourself as a morning person, which I never did, but I do now. So we can talk about in the future how I worked myself up to that. If you want to talk about that, let me know in the comments. I'll drop something down there or I'll do a short or something to let you know how I did that on the practical side. But what's important is the level of discipline that's required there. And that may be an early morning thing for you, just like it was for me. It may be that you have to, after a long day of work, be disciplined enough to make the time to sit down and actually work on your business every single day. What that discipline looks like is going to be different for everyone based on their personality and based on what your circumstances are, what your life looks like right now. And honestly, what season of life you're in, because that's going to change too. Like I said, what was discipline for me getting up super early like that is not necessary now. I find and make the time elsewhere. And so my discipline shows up in different ways. And then another thing that was said here in the passage, I'll just kind of read that again real quick, and plan the day's work for her servant girls. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have servant girls. I don't know. This makes sense if you have employees or if you have maybe an assistant or a VA or interns or whatever it might be, somebody who works with you, or it might even be clients, depending on what your business looks like. The fact that in your time of discipline, you get up early and one of your priorities is to prepare the day for the people that you're responsible for, okay? And they kind of even talk about that a little bit when they say to prepare breakfast for her household. Okay, well, I don't know what your household looks like. Mine's just me, my husband, and the dog. But let me tell you, the dog gets breakfast before anybody else, typically, and definitely before the day starts. So there are going to be certain priorities that we don't necessarily get to choose because they're just based on the needs of the people around us, the creatures around us, the members of our family that we love. And so we have to remember that in some cases, their needs might need to come first. I know this feels a little bit counterintuitive because in our culture, we're so often told that we need to take care of our needs first. And I'm not saying that your needs aren't important because they are. You can't give from an empty cup. It's a phrase we hear a lot. You got to put on your own oxygen mask before you can put on someone else's. All of those things are true. But when it comes to self-discipline, a really big part of that is being practical and realistic about what your circumstances are going to be, what boundaries you can reasonably set in your life. So as an example, and you can relate this in your own life, however it makes sense. If I were to just decide that my dog, who is still a puppy, by the way, not even a year old yet, if I were to decide that he didn't get to eat breakfast until I was done with XYZ, yeah, I could make that boundary. I could set that boundary that he would not really understand. And I could sit and try to focus on whatever I'm doing. Maybe it's my devotional in the morning or my journal writing or whatever it might be. I could sit there and say, no, 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 I need to take care of me first. I'm going to do this first. But am I actually setting myself up for success in that self-discipline in that moment when I know that it would take me like 5 minutes to prep the dog's breakfast and let him go eat it? Or I can say, no, I'm going to do my thing first, and then I'm going to be distracted the whole time because he's going to be whining and crying and clawing at me and all this kind of stuff because he's hungry. There are going to be circumstances where we need to look at our priorities and be realistic about it. Yes, my thing is important. I'm not going to say more important than feeding the dog because dogs have to eat, but it's important for me to recognize that it's not about the order of how things get done that elevate its priority. Just because I feed him first or I do whatever else it is first doesn't make it more important than the thing that I need to do, reading my Bible. It's not more important because I'm doing it first. In fact, I'm doing it first to get it out of the way, to get rid of that distraction so that I can be more focused on the thing that is more important. Does that make sense? That's kind of something that I've learned over the past few years about setting boundaries and scheduling and building habits, and something that I talk about ad nauseum, and it's not going to stop. So if you like that kind of stuff, you're in the right place. But I think that's such an important distinction that just doesn't get talked about very often. We're always told about self-care and how important it is to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, and that is important, but that doesn't necessarily make it first. And this kind of leads nicely into the next grouping of qualities that I want to talk about, which is that she is wise, strategic, and resourceful. Now, in my opinion, these things all come back to the biblical quality of stewardship. Stewardship with our finances, which we see all throughout the Bible, but also stewardship with our time management, that thing that we struggle with until it finally clicks, because someday it will finally click. If you're still in the struggle, I'm not saying I've got it mastered and it's totally perfect, but it has definitely clicked for me in a way that it never had before. So moving on to verse 16, says, she goes to inspect a field and buys it. With her earnings, she plants a vineyard. And then jumping to verse 18, she makes sure her dealings are profitable. Her lamp burns late into the night. So this is when we're talking about decision making and thinking long term and finding that clarity that we need to really make the most of our time and money. And this is something that I've talked about for a while on the tech side of what I do, in the Tech Savvy Academy aspects of things. I talk about this specifically in relation to the tools and things that we buy to use in our business, how we need to pay attention to what season of business we're in. A lot of the mentors out there are talking about certain platforms and things that they use now because they have reached a certain level of success that it makes sense for them to spend that kind of money on something. And honestly, that applies beyond tools as well into things like masterminds and group programs and stuff like that. But we're not going to go there right now. When we're talking about tools, this is where we have to find the balance in stewardship of our finances and our time. Obviously, when you're first starting out, your business is not earning any income. And so the philosophy of you're only going to use income from your business to invest in your business, which is what she's talking about here, right? She inspects a field and buys it. And then with the earnings from that, she goes and buys a vineyard. But roll back for a second. She inspects a field and buys it. Okay, well, she had to put money into buying that field from somewhere else. There obviously was no income from the field until she had the field for a while. So she obviously started out where she invested from her family's money. She invested from their budget into buying this field. But once she bought the field and made it successful, That's where she uses that income from her field to go and plant the vineyard and grow her business. So that's when, in my opinion, you obviously have to start out with that first financial investment, be a good steward of those finances, make sure you get the best price for whatever it is that you're buying into. And sometimes that means buying a tool that is maybe a little less convenient. It's not as flashy. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles. It's going to take a little bit more time to set up. And maybe you would rather hire someone to just do it all for you. But is that really the best stewardship of your finances in that moment? Maybe you can spend a little time learning, putting in the elbow grease, and creating something in a little bit more difficult platform, a little bit clunkier or whatever it might be, but more affordable, better use of your finances. And then as your business grows and you're ready to go off and plant your vineyard, maybe then you can choose, okay, which of these tools has been taking up more of my time than I would like? I want to be a better steward of my time in that way. And maybe I can upgrade to a tool that's maybe a little bit more expensive. So I'm going to delve into my income a little bit so that I can free up some time. That's kind of the balance that we consistently work in as we are growing and scaling up a business. Something that I've done, I started out in, I want to say my first email platform was MailChimp, which if you've been around here anytime recently, like I bag on MailChimp because I am so not a fan. And it's funny because part of what I don't like about it now is that I feel like they've gotten greedy and so it's expensive. But back then they had a much better free plan. And so that's what I was using. And then as time went on, email marketing is one of those platform types that I personally kind of grow in and allow myself to spend a little bit more of my finances in now because it has more bells and whistles, more automation, and is just a smoother experience for my customers overall. It allows me to have more of my time back. But yeah, it is going to require a little bit of money. So that's just an example in my business of how this kind of plays in, of making these strategic decisions and thinking long term and recognizing that I don't want to be spending all of my time trying to stay on top of every time somebody says that they, want to opt in for this and that and having to go in and do all this stuff manually. I don't want my business to look like that long term. I don't want my life to look like that long term. And so I make strategic and I think hopefully wise choices about when I'm going to upgrade and kind of invest a little bit more financially so that I get more of my time back. That's just one example. I'm sure you can find a way that relates and applies in your own business, maybe in the same way, maybe in a different way. But that's not just good business. That's actually godly business. Those are qualities that we are encouraged to have as a Proverbs 31 woman, and especially as a Proverbs 31 businesswoman specifically. And some of these decisions are going to be difficult for us to make on our own. And so this is where I think, bringing God into the mix and praying about it, obviously, yeah, talk to your husband about it, see what he thinks. If you're at a place where you are making enough income in your business, you have that profit to play with and to reinvest into your business, fantastic. But it still doesn't necessarily mean that you have to or you need to. So these are things that absolutely, if you're unsure, if it's not abundantly clear to you what to do, talking to your husband about it, praying with your husband about it, these are great things to do to help guide you into making those really strategic and wise decisions. And what's a great byproduct of that kind of decision making when you are prayerful about it and you talk to your husband and you bring these important people into the conversation, it allows you to feel so much less like you're winging it, less like you're drifting through your business, and so much more clear and decisive. And then the last grouping of qualities that really stuck out to me here are that the Proverbs 31 businesswoman, she is generous, kind, and wise in her influence. So for the passage here, this is where we're going to jump around a little bit. So we've got verse 20 where it says, she extends a helping hand to the poor and opens her arms to the needy. We're going to touch on that a little bit more in a second. And then we're going to jump ahead to verses 22 and 23. She makes her own bedspreads. She dresses in fine linen and purple gowns. Her husband is well known at the city gates where he sits with the other civic leaders. Okay, so the bedspreads part of that we're going to skip past because that's not really relevant to what we're talking about here. But I do want to talk about she dresses in fine linen and purple gowns. Now, the color purple is well known as a symbolic color of royalty. And fine linens and all of that, it all speaks to her being successful and having a good, solid reputation. Now, does that mean that you need to be wearing designer clothes and always like completely done up and dressed to the nines? I hope not. I really, really hope not, because that is totally not my style. But I think what it's talking about is more, again, symbolic. She is well known, well respected, and successful. She is looked up to, right? As royalty would be looked up to, as somebody who has it all together, who is put together. We look up to those people. We respect them. And that's what I think we're talking about here. But I don't want to glance past this whole her husband is well known at the city gates where he sits with the other civic leaders. I think this is more important for us as women than it seems. This seems like something that's like, okay, well, she picked a good husband. Yes, absolutely. That's very important. But also, I think what it's saying is that because she is well respected and successful, it's elevating her husband. I mean, that goes both ways, obviously. But what we're talking about here is that by the woman being this really well respected, looked up to, and successful woman, she is helping to elevate her husband to a place of respect. And especially in this society, when they're talking about him being well known at the city gates and sitting with the civic leaders, that's like a really big deal back then. That gave him lots of clout and responsibility, and it made him more like an elder of the city. He was a big deal. And a big part of that was because he had a wife who was well respected and a wife who was successful. And then, of course, we have to read the verse that is the one that's always put on the memes and the infographics and whatnot, but it also plays in here. So, verse 25, she is clothed with strength and dignity, and she laughs without fear of the future. When she speaks, her words are wise, and she gives instructions with kindness. So this is where that whole wise in her influence comes in here. We all have influence. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how new you are in your business. It doesn't matter how new you are in your faith. None of that matters. You have a sphere of influence. And that may be influence with one person, a circle of one in your own home. Or that could be an influence of thousands or even millions. Is so important. When she speaks, her words are wise and she gives instructions with kindness. I can think of so many applications for that, and I know you can too. Obviously, if you have employees or people who work under you, this is super important. If you have clients, if you're a coach, how you approach people, even just colleagues, how you approach them and how you speak to them with kindness and wisdom is going to have an impact in every aspect of your relationship and ultimately your success. And then the last thing that I just want to go back and touch on, because I absolutely love this phrase, and she laughs without fear of the future. Okay, fear of the future. This is just worry. This is just anxiety, right? That's all we're talking about. She laughs without anxiety. She is joyful. She is happy. And the only way that is possible is when we know that it's not all on us. Because the second that we make it all our responsibility, the worry, the anxiety, the imposter syndrome, all of that just rears its ugly head. But when we recognize that we are not alone in this, we have God to lean on. He has a plan. Even when we don't understand it, we can laugh without fear of the future. We can be joyful and not anxious. So I hope that these insights have been helpful for you. They've been so helpful for me over the past few years, and even just the past month or so as I've been re-looking at this passage, knowing that I wanted to do this episode. It's just really put me in a better perspective going into 2026, going into this revamped podcast, and just into what my business routine is going to look like moving forward. I absolutely want to hear your insights, though. So please, please, please let me know in the comments, what if this stuck out to you? Is there something I said that you disagree with? Is there something that I didn't talk about that God laid on your heart when we were looking at this? Let us know in the comments. And also, one thing that I'm going to be doing on all of these episodes is the first pinned comment in all of these episodes is going to be a place for prayer. It's going to be a place for you to ask for prayer in your business. And the only thing that I would suggest, recommend, encourage is that if you go down there to add a prayer request, and I hope you do, take a few minutes to scroll through some of the other prayer requests and pray for someone. And once you've prayed for them, thumbs up their comment or respond to them and let them know, because there's something so powerful about praying for each other, but even more so about knowing that other people have been praying for you. So I'll see you guys down there in the comments. Thanks for watching this episode all the way to the end, and I hope that you liked it, and more importantly, that you found it helpful. If you did, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with another Christian business owner that you know is going to love it as much as you did. God bless you.